So I thought that maybe you could start with a little bit of meditation, and so can lean forward a little bit and arch the spine, and look about 3 feet in front, and close our eyes. And can focus in on the breath, can know when it's coming in, and know when it's going out. If one breathes in a long breath, can just know I'm breathing in a long breath. And if one breathes in a short breath, can just know I'm breathing in a short breath. And can try to be aware of the breath through the whole breathing process. Noticing as the breath comes in through the nose, all the way through the in-breath, as the in-breath turns to the out-breath, all the way through the out-breath, and then as the out-breath turns back to the in-breath again. Trying to keep mindfulness as continuous as possible. And can try to spread one's awareness so that it fills the whole body. One of the metaphors they give for this in the canon is like a lake, or spreading feelings through the body in the canon is like a lake with an underground source. And the water comes up from the underground source and fills the whole lake. And in the same way, one can let one's awareness expand until it fills one's whole body. And with awareness filling the whole body, one can practice whole body breathing. And when practicing whole body breathing, can be helpful to change one's perception of the breath so that it's not just air that one is pulling in and out of the lungs, but it's a kind of energy that's all around and coursing through the body. And it's possible to pull it into and out of every pore. Almost like one's body was a big sponge. So on the in-breath, one can think whole body. On the out-breath, one can think whole body. Okay, and can open our eyes and do a short reflection on the Dhamma. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dhammāṃ saranang gacchāmi, Saṅghāṃ saranang gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammāṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Saṅghāṃ saranang gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammāṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Saṅghāṃ saranang gacchāmi. So hope that everybody is having a great day wherever it may be. And yeah, I was corresponding with a fellow that I know named Marcelo, and had asked him if he had any potential questions for a Dhamma discussion for the internet. And he said, just took a brief point for him here, but the differences and similarities between Samatha and Vipassana, when to do one versus the other or both at the same time. And so there's kind of, I guess you could say, kind of in the canon, Samatha and Vipassana get described as kind of qualities of mind. Kind of, as far as my understanding is, kind of Samatha is this more, you could take as the more kind of calm aspect of the mind, and Vipassana is this kind of aspect of the mind where one is kind of trying to see clearly, and kind of, and so in general, the Buddha has these different meditation topics. The commentary divides them up into Samatha and Vipassana, but all of them will have an element of both. So you've got meditation topics that are kind of, they tend to just be focused on one thing. And kind of, so your goal in this meditation, more or less, is to refine your levels of calm and stay focused on one thing. So for example, staying focused on the breath. One just tries to stay focused on the breath and tries to make it more and more calm, tries to make it so that feelings of rapture arise and then one tries to spread those through one's body. Kind of this is the general description of trying to develop what they call jhanas in the Ken. And usually when we do these videos, tend to follow kind of methods of Ajahn Lee and Ajahn Thanissaro in describing breath meditation. So here this breath meditation is a kind of example of something that you might call a samatha object. In other words, we're just focusing on the breath. Any thoughts come up not related to the breath, then put them aside, and one returns to the breath, just learning to focus one's mind on one thing. And as this happens, then one's kind of thoughts can become less and less, and one's breath can become more and more refined, give rise to these feelings of happiness. So there's this element there, there's the strongest element there that one's trying to cultivate is this samatha, this kind of calm. But there's also this element of what you might call vipassana, or investigation. I haven't really looked up, all the connotations of the word in Pali, but, maybe investigation is a good way to describe it, in the sense that one is trying to find out what are the barriers to one's calm, what are the barriers to one's mind becoming more fully engrossed in the breath, to one's mind becoming more fully focused on the breath. And then those are the kind of thoughts that one lets through, so that one can learn to focus in on the breath more and more. Kind of what is it that might make the breath more or less refined? What is it that might make the body more comfortable? These are the kind of vipassana type thoughts that comes into breath meditation. So in this way, there's an element of samatha, this kind of calm, and there's an element of vipassana, it's kind of, trying to investigate. So some of those meditation topics that are kind of more calm focused are like mindfulness of breathing. That's usually just, focusing on the breath, although there are all these, of course, we just mentioned, all these different ways to fine-tune it, to manipulate it, and to work with it, so that vipassana is also an element there, strong element there. There's also metta bhavana. There's kind of the four Brahma Viharas, where one is trying to cultivate these unlimited states of goodwill, of compassion, of empathetic joy, and equanimity towards all beings. And let's see here, there's also there's 10 kasinas, which are rarely done, these kind of discs They're mentioned briefly in the canon, so they are meditation topics taught by the Buddha, but rarely done these days by people. And these are just kind of colored discs that one learns to focus on. And so one brings up this image of this colored disc and just keeps focusing in on that disc. And don't have, from what I've heard, I mean, some people try to make the color of the disc maybe more beautiful, this kind of thing. They also try to expand the kasina, kind of expand this kind of like blue or red or whatever disc, or fire, whatever earth. There's different kind of kasinas one can use. And then one learns to expand them, almost like with this perception of like earth with like 1,000 pegs, so it's stretched and kind of, you focus in on the smooth, earth, something like this. There's also this kind of a wilderness perception. This is one that's rarely practiced these days, where one learns to focus on less and less disturbances in the wilderness. Okay, we're in the wilderness, that's free of the sound of the city, and kind of then you focus in, okay, you just focus in on the perception, I think, of like earth or so you kind of go that way into a more and more calm. So all these kind of meditation topics, they have elements to them where one's basically trying to make one's focus on that object more calm, more refined, more steady, make one's body feel more at ease. But they also have this element of vipassana. So in the case of the Brahma Viharas, we discussed already mindfulness of breathing. In the case of Brahma Viharas, it would be kind of, what's my obstacle to feeling goodwill or empathetic joy or whatever it is that might come up. And kind of what is it that keeps pulling my mind away when I try to spread these feelings outwards? How can I make those feelings more pervasive? These are the kind of vipassana type thoughts that can come in and be useful. And as far as kasinas go, yeah, if, again, I'm not, there's people who are experts on kasinas. I haven't heard too much about them. But, as far as the canon goes, the very little that I've heard, there are these elements of spreading the kasina, trying to make it very large. And also there's elements of trying to make the color in it more beautiful, all these various things that one might do to become more absorbed in the object. So in this way, samatha is primary in these topics of concentration, these meditation topics. Vipassana is kind of what you call a secondary element. Then you have what's meditation topics that are kind of a bit more perception focused, like you have ones that try to counter our usual perceptions, so the usual perceptions that a person might have. So there's the topics of loathsomeness of the body. That's probably the most common one that monks do in terms of what you might call vipassana topics, and that one is for monks to undercut the fetter of lust, so that one learns to perceive the unattractive aspects of the body. So in doing this kind of loathsomeness of the body, one learns to break the body down into these 32 parts. So kind of, there's many more parts. Modern science has names for, I guess all the little glands in one's brain. But it's just, head hair, body hair, nails, teeth, skin, and then flesh, sinews, bones, bone marrow, kidneys, all these things that go through kind of different organs in one's body. And one learns to perceive these things as kind of disgusting. So, wait a minute, I think this head hair is so beautiful, but, if I went to the body, the barber shop and picked it up, I wouldn't want to touch it. It's very smelly, You're kind of be grossed out, or if you see it in a drain. And, same with people's skin, like, one's skin, the skin is, very beautiful or whatever, but if one sees some dead skin somewhere, it's, loathsome and disgusting. And also one learns to focus on, kind of the body has, eyes, and one learns to focus on these various repulsive aspects of the body, like, fluids leak from one's eyes, or so is, bodies, one's body can smell very bad, if it's not washed for 3 years. So in these ways, one always cultivates this perception of the loathsomeness of the body. And this usually this is used to counter the perception that usually automatically comes up when one looks at, if one looks at a body that one finds beautiful, then, this is a beautiful body. So one's always looking for the beauty in people's bodies. And in doing that, one becomes attached to them. This is the kind of the cord that ties one to lust. So one learns to cut this cord. And this is a cord based on perception. Because obviously the body does have all these really unattractive elements to it. If one were able to see beneath the skin of one's body, then it would be really, frightening and disgusting. Or if anything inside the body ever comes out, it's just, so disgusting one can't, bother with it. To say nothing, actually, if somebody, clothes or whatever can stay clean for a really long time in a drawer for like a year, but if if somebody wears them and sweats into them even like 1 or 2 days, they become, just really smelly. So, so in this way, there's all these counter perceptions one can bring up, and this is kind of a more Vipassana type, more Vipassana type meditation. In other words, one is more exclusively focusing on building perceptions to counter one's usual perceptions. But this Vipassana also has this element of samatha, because if one is built, what one does when one uses these perception meditations, usually when one thinks in particular ways, there's all these variety of ways a person might think about something. Oh, this person's beautiful, their beautiful hair, their beautiful eyes. You keep thinking about this, and there's just like a million ways that one could potentially think about, say, in general, the beauties of a body in kind of a million ways, and it's just automatic, just keeps coming these different angles. So to counter that, this Vipassana approach uses, one deliberately tries to think of all these different ways that the body is foul or disgusting. You just kind of come at it from all these different angles, keep going. As long as this perception of foulness is building up, one feels the perception of kind of lust diminish. But this also relies on an element of samatha, because if one doesn't have a certain level of stability in the mind, a certain level of calm, then one just ends up thinking about all kinds of things. One starts thinking about the foulness of the body, and next thing you know, like 2 minutes later, one's thinking about the groceries or or movies or whatever it might be, or one's relatives, or COVID-19, all these different things one can think about if one doesn't have this element of just being able to focus on one thing. So even in some of the topics, there's this element of calm that's there. There's this quality in mind. Both these things are present. And these Vipassana topics as well, when one concentrates on them, they can also give rise to feelings of rapture in one. So that's not exclusive to calm. And this is kind of laid out in the Kayagata Sutta. And so the other ones that are more Vipassana based are like mindfulness of death. You could say Buddha-anusati, Dhamma-anusati, the kind of recollection of the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. There's recollection of the devas. I've done good enough deeds to be reborn in these various heavens. There's recollections of one's own generosity, that one's done these various kind of good, generous deeds, and that, there may be many stingy people around. One is a generous person. There's kind of, you've got mindfulness of death, foulness of the body. There's the foulness of food, learning to recollect the foulness of food. And there's many, the recollection of impermanence, the recollection of dispassion, peacefulness, and nibbana. There's kind of a list, especially of about 10 that the Buddha seems to recommend. I think about 7 to 10. Can't remember them all exactly right now, but that the Buddha recommends very frequently. So as far as when to, just check my time here, as far as when to use these, basically it depends what kind of defilements are coming up in one's mind. If one is frequently finding that one is, oppressed by lust, then one has to, frequently go to this mindfulness of the body. If one finds that one is frequently, getting into trouble from overthinking, then one should use a samatha object. If one is frequently getting oppressed by hatred, then one uses metta, this kind of metta bhavana. So in part, these meditation topics are designed to undermine specific defilements in the mind. So one uses them when those defilements arise. But another important point about Buddhist meditation is that depending on a person's character, there might be topics that are more or less suitable for different people. Now, there's so many topics, so many ways to meditate that the Buddha gives in the canon, that the other consideration that one has to have is, what type of topic feels right when one is doing it. What is it? What type of approach is it that one feels really works well, feels kind of really gels? So, in the same way, there's all these different ways to make money. In the world, one can be an artist, one can be a driver, one can be, I don't know, whatever, a business person, or, work for the government, or there's so many different jobs one can do. And the type of job that one finds satisfying might be different for each person. But all of them get one enough money to get some food. So in a rough analogy as well, one has to figure out which job it is that one likes and kind of go for that, train for that. In the same way, these different meditation topics, one generally learns about them by kind of trying them out. And eventually one gets to see, wait a minute, my mind inclines towards this one, much more. I seem to get really good results doing this one. I'm just going to stick with it for the time being until it feels like it's not giving good results. So when one does this as well, one tends to find, people sometimes get divided into two broad camps, those who have kind of more samatha characters, those who have more vipassana characters. So some people might find they really gel with these perception type meditations really well, and kind of the mindfulness of foulness of the body, mindfulness of death, all these various things. Other people might find they gel really well with these more calm meditations, more so than the other ones. And so they'll tend to do those more. And the ones who are more Vipassana-oriented will tend to do those more. But the thing about the Buddhist path is that one can enter it from these various angles, but in general, one has to develop skill in all these areas. So if one enters from this kind of Vipassana angle, or one enters from the Samatha angle, one enters from Samatha, one might find going, eventually there's problems that just these kind of particular meditation topics aren't fixing. And that's when one has to start to bring in Vipassana. There's kind of a Vipassana elements. Similarly, if one kind of, say like one is doing a lot of metta, then lust starts coming up really strongly, one can't overcome it, then one starts to use both, metta and asubha. And similarly, if one is this kind of Vipassana character, one might find that there are certain kind of instances as one keeps going that one starts to need to cultivate samatha. So in the end, we need both of them. So as far as when to do them both, it depends largely on one's character and what type of defilements are arising. But also, many people will have more than one meditation topic. Sometimes they'll have like two that they do. So, oftentimes one person will have like a calm type one, like mindfulness of breathing, and then a more Vipassana one. And they'll have like one or two, or sometimes at least, they'll have one or two main topics that they tend to do all the time. And some people who use mindfulness of breathing use it in both ways, both to contemplate impermanence and to develop these jhanas. So again, it's all kind of very individual as to what one to do, when one should use one, when one should use other, when one should use both. It depends on what defilements are arising in one's character. So there's this kind of simile in the canon where the Buddha says that even if one can't read another person's mind, one should learn to read one's own mind. So it gives a simile of a cook who watches what his master likes. If he likes salty food, then he prepares more salty. If he likes sweet food, he prepares more sweet. So in the same way, we learn to watch our minds, to see what it likes, to see what benefits it in moving forward and overcoming bad qualities of mind. And whatever that is, then we give it more. Until the day comes when it kind of wants something else, then we give it more of that. So in this way, it's not possible really to plan out a specific path. It's more something that one has to feel. There was this kind of simile that I think it was Deng Xiaoping gave, crossing the river by feeling the stones. In other words, you cross this river by feeling the water, the stones under one's feet. And in the same way, one learns how much Vipassana, what topics to use by kind of feeling the stones under when crossing the river. Feels good here, we'll keep going. And in this way, hopefully, eventually one crosses the river and reaches the further shore, which is the goal of Buddhist meditation. Okay, so I think I'll leave that for reflection and hope that everybody has a great day, wherever it might be, and wishing you all the best till next time.